Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I think the Department of Justice just went over that all our cameras have to be, they would like for all our cameras to be on during the duration of the meeting. For all the members of the public, we're asking for you to keep your cameras turned off until the public comment portion of the meeting. And again, my name is LaWanda Hawkins. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm with a group called Justice for Murdered Children, and I was appointed by the governor to sit on this board for the second term. And now I'd like to turn it over to board member Angela Sierra.
Great. Thank you, LaWanda. Good afternoon. I'm Angela Sierra. I'm an attorney with the California Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Enforcement section, and I am Attorney General Rob Bonta's designee on the board. Looking forward to this meeting today. I will now pass it on to board member William Armeling.
Hey everybody, my name is Bill Armeling, Whaler Bill is fine. It's my second term on the board as a Senate appointee. I'm also a professor in sociology at San Jose State, and I'm been there for 19 years. I can pass it to, let's see, Lauren?
I believe we have board member Smith.
Oh, cool. Go ahead.
Hello, this is board member Smith. Grateful to be here. I will be on camera in just a moment. Just in commute. I'm an appointee of the Attorney General.
Board member Smith, I wanted to flag for you. I'm having some difficulty hearing you. That might help when you have your camera on, but just letting you know that it seems like there's some audio trouble.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm present. I will be on camera in just a few minutes.
Okay. Are any other board members present?
Dr. Hawkins, it looks like that's all we have for today.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the update by the Department of Justice. Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry, you guys. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the September the 2nd, 2025 meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. So currently pending is a motion to approve the September 2nd meeting minutes as written. And I'm going to go ahead and begin a roll call vote, beginning with board member Armeling. Board member Armeling, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member Armeling votes aye. Member Hawkins?
Aye.
Member Hawkins votes aye. Member Sierra?
Aye.
Member Sierra votes aye. And Member Smith?
Aye.
Member Smith votes aye. All right, the meeting minutes are approved unanimously.
Thanks. Now, the next item on the agenda is an update by the Department of Justice.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think we have a PowerPoint, so I'll just wait a few minutes to get that up. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Fretz. I'm an attorney at the California Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Enforcement section. Along with attorney Martha Gomez, we will be presenting some proposed topics for the subcommittee to consider for this year's RIPA report. Next slide, please. Before we begin the DOJ update, we want to thank both Pastor Kreiner and LaWanda Hawkins for their leadership and service at last year's co-chairs for the Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. For this year's report, Pastor Kreiner will continue to serve as a co-chair for this subcommittee. Co-chair Hawkins has expressed interest in transitioning out of the co-chair position, but remaining a subcommittee member. This means we have an opening for a co-chair position for the Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. As a result, at our next subcommittee meeting, members will have an opportunity to nominate themselves or someone else and elect a new co-chair for this year's Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. Please be prepared to nominate and vote for a new co-chair at next subcommittee meeting in June. And please feel free to reach out to the DOJ if you are interested in serving as co-chair and have any questions about the position.
I got a question. If he pleads guilty, this is Brooke.
Next slide, please.
Co-chair Hawkins, I think you might be, there we go. I think there was some background noise.
Now we will present several proposals for the board to consider, including in this year's report, starting with the civilian complaints chapter. One issue raised by the subcommittee was related to the low sustained rate for racial and identity bias complaints. In last year's report, the board expressed concern with the low number of sustained complaints and the desire to explore the cause for this low number in future reports. As shown on the screen, we have identified some proposed areas of discussion for this year's report in light of this issue. The first proposed area would be to look more closely at the RIPA complaint data. There are two categories of analyses that our office could do for the board. First, the subcommittee could provide some context for the data on the low number of sustained findings using summary statistics. This would include looking at the dispositions across all complaints, dispositions across identity profiling complaints, and dispositions by type of identity profiling allegation over time. This longitudinal analysis would help the subcommittee get a more granular understanding of the data that we are seeing with complaints and how many are sustained. The subcommittee could also look at the overall complaint dispositions, dispositions of profiling complaints, and dispositions by type of profiling allegation broken down by agency over time. These tables are already included in the large appendix that we publish with the RIPA report every year. However, if it is helpful to highlight the agencies that do sustain complaints, this may be helpful to the board if we can identify some commonalities or best practices. We have done some initial research into this issue. We want to note that our preliminary research indicates there are limitations on how granular we can go into this data since it is summary. Even if the board has more detailed individual complaint information, because the number of sustained complaints is so low year to year, it may be difficult to draw any meaningful conclusions about sustained complaints from more detailed analyses, partly due to re-identification concerns. Another proposed area of discussion to address the issue of the low number of sustained complaints is by identifying best practices for investigations into civilian complaints. In other words, the board could conduct research into best practices for investigation of racial and identity complaints, both in law enforcement and other contexts, to try to understand where there may be gaps in law enforcement investigation processes. Past RIPA reports have focused largely on accessibility to the complaints process, so the next step is looking at law enforcement complaint investigation procedures. We conducted some preliminary research into the complaint investigation procedures used by the largest law enforcement agencies in California, and many don't have investigation procedures specific to investigations of racial and identity bias complaints. Most agencies have very general procedures that are to be followed, but the procedures do not provide specific standards or benchmarks for investigating these types of complaints. There are currently very few studies on best practices for complaint procedures in the law enforcement context, so we may need to look outside law enforcement to other contexts such as employment. We want to note that there may be potential limitations to this proposal and research. For example, there may not be best practices specific to law enforcement complaint investigations, so it may take more than a year to develop best practices for complaint investigations. We're also open, as always, to other proposals or topic areas the subcommittee might have. And if you want to discuss that more during today's discussion period, we will certainly take notes on that. Now we will turn to a discussion of potential topics the board may want to consider for the accountability chapter of the 2027 RIPA report, and I will turn it over to Martha to discuss those topics.
Hi guys, I'm Martha Gomez. Last year, in light of federal immigration enforcement actions in California, this subcommittee and the board at large expressed a desire to explore ways to support state and local law enforcement officers in protecting California's diverse population. The subcommittee expressed concern around immigration enforcement practices, and as such, this subcommittee may want to explore the overlap between immigration enforcement and the RIPA objective of reducing racial and identity bias. More specifically, this subcommittee could assess whether law enforcement officers can be held accountable for biased conduct that occurs during work performed in the immigration enforcement context. First, this subcommittee could assess whether existing legislation provides an accountability mechanism for prospective peace officers who have previously demonstrated racial or identity bias while working for an entity that engages in immigration enforcement. For example, as to prospective peace officers or applicants, this subcommittee could analyze the background check mechanism provided under Penal Code Section 832.12, which requires that a peace officer seeking employment with a law enforcement agency in this state shall give written permission for the hiring law enforcement agency to view the officer's general personnel file in any separate file designated by the department. Penal Code 832.12 also provides that before employing the prospect, the law enforcement agency shall request and review these records provided by previous employers. The employment information that may be sought includes performance evaluations, disciplinary actions, eligibility for rehire, and other information relevant to the performance of a peace officer, except when the disclosure is prohibited by state or federal law. The subcommittee could assess whether these background checks give law enforcement agencies the capacity to determine whether a prospect or applicant has previously engaged in inappropriate racial and identity profiling in their past immigration enforcement work, including whether there are limitations, and if needed, proposed legislative updates to improve this accountability mechanism. Second, the subcommittee could assess whether legislation provides an accountability mechanism for existing peace officers who demonstrate racial or identity bias while moonlighting for an entity that engages in immigration enforcement. Specifically, as to existing peace officers, the subcommittee could evaluate whether SB 2's decertification protections are broad enough to encompass peace officers' racial and identity bias that occurs with a concurrent employer. We know that effective January 1st, 2022, California Senate Bill 16 mandates that all peace officers immediately report all use of force to their employing department or agency. This requirement was codified as Penal Code Section 832.13. However, there is no ongoing requirement for peace officers to report all complaints related to racial or identity bias, much less for those that occur during federal moonlighting. This subcommittee would explore existing legislation to address any gaps in reporting. It could assess if it is feasible for legislation to mandate ongoing self-reporting by peace officers related to racial and identity bias that occurs in concurrent employment or volunteer positions. In addition, we welcome any other proposals you may have in the topic of accountability for peace officers that have worked in immigration enforcement or will concurrently perform work in that area. The next potential topic we want to discuss is auditing. In the last slide, Attorney Rebecca Fretz discussed that this subcommittee had serious concerns with the low sustained rate for racial and identity profiling complaints in the RIPA data. Here, the subcommittee could conduct research to evaluate the best practices for internal audits of the complaint and investigation processes, with an eye toward identifying the key operational factors for success, such as alignment with strategic vision, confidentiality, competence, objectivity, and also identify the challenges of maintaining independence, especially when internal auditors are employees of the organization they audit. Likewise, here we are open to additional proposals and ideas from the subcommittee. I'll turn it over to you, LaWanda, and the subcommittee to discuss.
Thank you. Very detailed. Thank you. Thank you for the update. And do we want to take a 10-minute break? No? Want to keep pushing?
Okay, so you want us to jump in on discussion here?
Yeah, we were supposed to take a 10-minute break and then come back to the discussion. The next,
Yeah. Guys, I don't have time for 10-minute breaks. We got to get this done.
yes.
I mean,
What-
we've only
what
been
do you
doing
say,
this
Angela?
15 minutes.
Yeah, either way is fine. I'm moving ahead is fine with me.
Okay. Chauncey?
I'm fine to proceed.
DOJ?
Proceeding may make sense given how quickly we've gotten through the agenda.
Okay, right on. Okay, the next agenda item is the discussion of proposed topics for 2027 report. This is our opportunity to decide what we would like to focus on in this year's report. The report could include the topics proposed by the DOJ, which we just heard, or other topics. Now is our chance to discuss these topics, then decide as a group what we would like to move forward with. Angela?
Yes, I have a clarifying question for DOJ. If we could just look at the differences between the two slides, the one slide under civilian complaints about the proposal about looking into best practices for investigations, how that topic is different than the issue about the low rate of sustained complaints in the accountability slide. I just want to, I want to make sure for myself and maybe some others want to see, are they kind of just different aspects of the same topic, or are they different topics? I just wasn't sure. That would be a question for DOJ, for Rebecca or Martha.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the first part regarding the civilian complaints, it's looking into the best practices into the investigations themselves, the processes, and the protocols and the benchmarks and the metrics that are used in the investigation process. And so one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that there may not be existing best practices for racial and identity profiling investigations. So it would be more looking through the literature to other existing practices that are best practices in investigations and bring that over to this context.
Okay.
For the accountability component, the research is related to internal auditing. So one of the mechanisms for accountability is, okay, you have these policies and practices, best practices, but are you implementing them? And so there can be some of the internal auditing offices have employees that are designated to audit and to make complaints, go through the process, evaluate it, and to assess it. So it's a way of including an internal accountability mechanism that is not the commission or somebody else. It's an internal mechanism, and that accountability process has its own best practices in the literature as well. So it would be looking into what would it take for based on the literature to have internal auditing that is going to be competent, effective, independent, and does it have the right tools and construction and also political buy-in to be effective? So I think that's why we were trying to identify like the success factors.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. So they kind of go hand in hand. And I mean, I personally think this could be a really ripe area for us to look at. I mean, when maybe, I don't know if we would be able to get any agencies to come speak to us about why these rates are low, but, for sustaining, again, these are complaints specific about racial and identity profiling. But, I suspect it may be that it may be very hard to investigate, or has, for some agencies, maybe smaller mid-sized agencies, been difficult. And what are they looking for, and could really benefit from some guidance from us. And again, maybe making analogies to other areas. And there may be analogies in the SB2 context, because a part of SB2 is the evaluations when hiring an officer and looking for bias. So maybe there's an analogy there, but I just think I would be very interested for this subcommittee to look into those questions and try to develop some best practices for those investigations, and then auditing as well to make sure that if they're in place, are they being implemented? I suspect, and maybe with more research we would know, that may be a reason for the low sustaining rate. I would also love, to the extent that we can hear from some agencies about what they're doing and about how they're interpreting, these, whatever threshold they are feeling they need to meet to be able to sustain a complaint. It'd be very interesting to hear from some agencies about that as well. And then the last thing on this one, I just, part of me, I'm not sure like how much diving deeper into the statistics will be, as fruitful for us, that as you noted, or I think Rebecca noted, there's going to be some challenges there. And I feel like we have done a fairly deep dive in these areas and comparing complaints that have different topics in our other reports. So I personally, to the extent, we have to decide among our resources where to use them, I would be in favor of more looking at investigatory techniques and best practices.
Thank you, Angela. Bill?
Cool, thanks. So I agree with Angela. I wanted to just respond to the couple of questions. Well, first of all, Martha and Rebecca, thank you so much. Great. I love that we're doing what we're doing here. So just a couple of things quickly. So I agree with Angela. The way I was going to phrase it is, I think what we're looking at here is needing more qualitative data over quantitative data here. We need the who and the how. Who's making these decisions? How are you making it? Straight up. Because statistically, that is a complete anomaly. 3 out of 2,000 or whatever. Like there's no stats professor on the planet is going to let that fly and be like, oh, there's nothing wrong here. So you've got to have some kind of not quantitative, because we can see the numbers. Like you just said, you can crunch those every which way. That's not the problem. You get 3 out of 2,000. You don't need to do much more crunching. So this is a purely qualitative investigation at this point. We need the who, the how, the why, all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, why also did you not internally see this as odd? So you internally saw that you guys had almost 2,000 complaints, but only 3 of them are legitimate. Well, I mean, like you got to make some like that also is a very interesting question to me. What is the internal dialogue when you see that data? The public's liars? We police a bunch of imbeciles? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm saying that because I would be very interested to hear what their narrative explanation is for their own data. I think would be an interesting, revealing kind of narrative. So I think that's what we're looking for here. And, the fear, obviously, I'm just going to say this on the record. The fear is we're going to look into this and find what we're finding with Doge, where it's some single, whatever, like we're saying, oh, this is a very interesting way of making these decisions. So I think we need that kind of qualitative data. And it sounds like, you guys are really on top of that. I that's what I'm hearing out of what you just kind of explained, Martha. So I think that sounds really dope. The other thing that I was just gonna throw out there, and it may be of assistance and it may not. AB 655 or the Clear Act might also offer some opportunity here for discipline for officers that are involved in some of this stuff outside. So Clear Act refers to any kind of organizational affiliation with a white supremacist or hate group or anything like that, which a lot of these folks that are playing around in the ICE game are also, my apologies, Oath Keepers and all this stuff. And all those guys qualify under 655. You can SB2 them for being an Oath Keeper in California. No one's doing it yet, but you can do it. So we have the tools to do this stuff. The question is, will anyone prosecute? Will anyone do it? Is the question. So again, I suggest you also look into the Clear Act because no one's been using that yet, even though it's ripe to be used. And then I guess, not to say something somewhat uncomfortable, and I emailed DOJ about this, just all cards on the table this week. But, we may have to have some uncomfortable conversations about members of this board who are directly involved in some of this activity. And so what are we going to do then? We got the guy literally seizing ballots as we speak in the state of California against the AG's wishes. That's a member of this board. We're going to talk about, like, we're going to go after people that are cooperating with this project. One of them's on this board. So I think we have some things to address. Like, and I don't know the best way to address it, but we're not going to sit here. I mean, just like the ICE stuff, like, we're not going to sit here, at least not while I'm on the board. We're not going to sit here and pretend as if this isn't happening. So I love that we're doing this. But if we're doing it, we got to do it. And that means, being really clear about all that stuff. And I know that's going to take a little courage on our part, but that's the way this is going to have to be,
Thank you, Bill. Do you mind me calling you Bill? Thank you, Bill, for sharing. Chauncey?
I echo the sentiment that board member Armeline offered up. I have nothing further to add at this moment.
Thank you. And I think Angela and Bill have said quite a bit for us as the board. Quality data is very important, and it's very important to understand why didn't they notice it before they sent the data in. Someone should have noticed this. There was something wrong. That speaks volume. Now we're moving right along. Is there anything else? Anybody else want to say anything about it? Any other board member? Before we move on to public comments? At this time, I'd like to invite members of the public to provide comments regarding the accountability and complaints section of the report. Please try to raise your hands using the team's function, but if you're not able to, so please unmute yourself. Are there any comments from Northern California? Oh, wait a minute. Are there any comments from Northern California? Jeffrey Vaughn? Sorry about
that. This isn't Northern California. This is just the physical location for the RIPA board meeting. But we do have a member of the public here that would like to provide a public comment.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Guys. My name is Andrea Thomas, and my son's name is Rashawn Williams, Risean. And we came to this board meeting not too long ago, just last year. And I remember Miss Angela Sierra, and I know there was Andrea Guerrero. She just had a meeting too for racial bias profiling. But we know that we're being monitored by a system that we should not be in by 702 FISA Foreign Intelligence. And it's called PRISM, I guess. But we're in prison. We're outside in prison because we're being harassed daily by, of course, by the congressional personnel that implemented this, that passed our names to the NSA. However, in our data location is open through this, so they are using our artificial intelligence. I want to say that the local police has our, excuse me, I'm not used to public speaking, but they have our artificial intelligence, I guess, on their dashboards or whatever, so they can locate me and my son. However, just yesterday, we were outside of the library by a school, and he was just out there with a marker, and somebody said that he had a gun, and so he had guns drawn on him in Wilmington, California, at the Wilmington library, Karen Bass, one of her libraries, whatever. So we are homeless because of this. They won't let me get a job. They won't let me get an apartment. This is all artificial intelligence. So I agree with Mr. William Arleman saying what he was saying about, like, I do believe that part of this regime is like a KKK, Black Marxists. I'm just saying across the board, there is bias geared towards my son because they can track us with artificial intelligence anytime that they want. And this is basically, they could have killed him because it was two guns. I have the video and everything of all the police that was out there. Let me see. They had to come get me from out of the library or whatever, but I believe that this is pure bias. This is white supremacists. And I can also say that this is Black Marxists that has joined in. This is basically, they have our data location that's open. And so I've been crying out to Rob Bonta about this, writing him about every incident, and we're being followed, chased, and targeted. We also was targeted through Metro because we know that Metro is linked to Metro transportation. That's another way to target us for racial bias through artificial intelligence. And we keep having these attacks through, I want to say it's just through the police. We are, and I'm gonna keep it short. I was attacked by somebody, and I still got the scars on my hands to prove it. And then my son was attacked. I didn't go to the hospital, and I should have, but my son was just attacked on Metro. A guy bit him in the neck, and we believe that it is the police that's keep coming for us. It has to be. There's but because of the artificial intelligence and the data location that's open, they can send anybody for us. But I believe that there is some inside deep state work that's, is one reason why we're being targeted. And so I just want to know what to do in this instance. But I think that having the police having our artificial intelligence, I don't think that's a good idea, because they have our whole genetic makeup, everything, and they can track us down, and they have our data location, and they can send anybody to us. I mean, they said that they don't even know who called. I asked them who called. They said, well, we don't know. And I said, that's just, we're being monitored. So anybody can come for us, anybody. So this is a case that I'm fighting right. This is one of the biggest investigations right now, because this is human trafficking. You guys have trafficked us up under 702 FISA, foreign intelligence, and it just keeps getting passed and passed and passed. And I'm an individual, me and my son, we want to get out of 702 FISA so the FBI won't have our data, and they won't have and the local police won't harass us. And I mean, I have the video of my son being handcuffed, and that right there, he could have got killed yesterday. And it's almost like they're saying that, oh yeah, we know that you guys are going to this board meeting, and we can kill you if we want, and we can do whatever it is. They said, well, he just had like the biggest marker that there was. And that, I mean, how could that be misconstrued as a gun? And why would he have a gun by it's a high school in a library, and he was just sitting outside smoking his cigarette. So that was just pure bias. And then they were like, well, why are you mad? Why wouldn't I not be mad if I see you guys having my son handcuffed out here? You guys could have killed him. I would have never even knew. But that was a threat. And we're being chased and stalked by this regime. And I feel like it's the KKK working from within. So I just feel like they need to be investigated, and they need some oversight, because everybody has an IP, and everybody is in some type of chat signal, something where they can all be caught. And the Black Marxists too, because they're a part of it. And that's all I got to say. My son, he'll come up. He's outside because we got pepper spray and we couldn't bring it in. So he'll come and and one more thing, we're being hit with. Not only, we're fighting with this Senator Ron Wyden, because I used to live in Oregon. He's helping me in Merkley. They're on the CIA Torture Act, because they're using the Wi-Fi to hit us with this AI, hit us with this 5G direct energy weapons. And so anybody and everybody can hit us with these weapons. And they're torturing my son to death, and he's like barely able to breathe because of the transportation that's hitting us with these weapons. We know a little bit of everybody is doing it. We know that, and I'm asking you, please, if you can call the governor, Attorney Bonta, to talk to the FAA, because we're being profusely harassed by the helicopters, drones, planes hitting us, and we're homeless because of this. Please, please, I'm gonna lose my son. They have some type of acoustic noise, and plus my investigator name is Amy Holm, and we're working with Do Weapons right now, but everybody is buying it and they don't want to confess that they're using these weapons, and that's all I got to say, because my son, this is genocide. And I know that I did like a little writing for the governor's office. I think it was one of the AG's assistant. It was a few months ago where they let me and my son do our little, what is it? The public statement. And we did send a public statement in about you guys, when you guys were changing the police reform about genocide. If you guys find out about, members, regimes or whatever, gangs or within the police, force, peace force, that they would be reprimanded. So we did do me and Rashawn, we did a public statement on this.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to thank, apologies, Co-Chair Hawkins. I just wanted to thank the member of the public for their public comment and let everyone know, just for awareness, for all members of the public, the board is here in a listening capacity. So typically the board does not respond to individual comments, but we really do appreciate you attending the meeting today and sharing your comment. The board can take that into consideration. But I do want to make sure, I know we have at least one other person too that has their hand raised to provide comment. So I wanted to make sure we also have time for them to share their perspective as well.
Thank you, Yasmin. Michelle?
Yes, thank you. With regard to the prior member of the public, I'm hoping that the board will direct her to some of the entities that can address some of the concerns that she raised. One thing that sometimes happens is that people vent and then they don't get directed to the proper place where their concerns can be addressed. So I hope that that will happen. My comments are somewhat related to that and, of course, to the topic of today's meeting. The first one has to do with due diligence when law enforcement agencies are hiring individuals who may have been peace officers in another jurisdiction. I'm not familiar with the penal code, so I'm just going to bring up some concerns that I have some firsthand knowledge of, which may fall through the cracks, and maybe they don't. For example, an individual may be hired without any disciplinary action being in his or her record at a prior agency, but might have been the subject of a lawsuit for which that person's place of employment actually paid out thousands or even millions of dollars, but then failed to put any indication of that settlement in that person's disciplinary record. So when they apply to be a peace officer in a different agency or even in the same city in a different capacity, there is a certain blindness or lack of information about what has actually occurred. So when you dig deeply enough so that disciplinary action is not taken by the prior agency, even when litigation has resulted in either a judgment or a settlement against that person, that needs to be known by the new agency. And I hope that is covered by the penal code. The other topic has to do with strengthening the complaint intake and adjudication procedure. I want to mention a positive case study. the department that I'm most familiar with in Santa Monica was the subject of complaints about the complaint procedure. And fortunately, the city hired the Office of Independent Review, which is an entity in Marina del Rey, California, to investigate the complaint intake and adjudication procedure. And subsequently, the assistant chief and the chair of our local police oversight commission did a major overhaul of the procedure. Now, I can't say for sure that it's excellent, but it certainly has all the earmarks of being better than it was. So if you're looking for a case study of how to do this, I think Santa Monica might be a good example, at least on this one criterion. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. Hi, do you mind, on the title, it says The Jamaican. Do you mind if I call you that? You have your hand up. The Jamaican, you're muted.
Am I heard?
Now I can hear you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and I thank you very much for your patience with me. I find interesting the former comment. The former speaker spoke of the situation where information exists about a police officer who misbehaved in some former position who now gets hired, because today, this very morning, there was an article that appeared, I don't remember where, but I've just posted a link to the chat that essentially said, police departments have information upon which to act, but most choose not to. I think that is true. I think that is true, particularly with regard to this board. From time to time, I say similar things as I just repeated or regurgitated from others, and I see nothing happen to it. Not many minutes ago, the sheriff who would be governor was mentioned. I bring that up merely because the sheriff who would be governor has served a useful purpose. Useful, in my opinion, because he mentioned, together with one other member of the board who sits here today, that RIPA data is so poor that the public would not stand for it if the public knew about the data quality. We speak of Chad Bianco. That is what he said. What he said was true. So he's like a clock, a broken clock. At least he was right once. His department has been a warning signal to this board and has been so for a long time. It was either last year or the one before that his department had a 7,000% increase in complaints made against them. My question to this board is, how is it possible that some entity could have a 7,000% increase in complaints without that being mentioned and dealt with? I think that the sheriff is in a retributive place because his department has been subject to what do they call it? Investigations by the DOJ, and that may be part of what motivates him. This is related, but not directly. I have a complaint to the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. It is not in a direct RIPA matter, but it is a complaint about police stops at the MTS of San Diego County. It has been with the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ for more than a year, and it has been ignored. When I say it here, I say it because I expect someone in the DOJ, the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ, to hear the Jamaicans mention of the complaint and to have it removed from the place where it is sat, unacted upon for more than a year. How is it possible for something like that to happen? Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Are there any other public comments? Hearing none, I'd like to thank members of the public for your comments. Before we conclude today's meeting, I'd like to ask the Department of Justice if there are any questions regarding the next steps.
I myself don't have any questions.
Neither do I. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Martha and Rebecca, for a magnificent report. Now that we've concluded our discussion, is there a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, the meeting is
Thank you all.
concluded.
No need for a motion to conclude the meeting, just a consensus, which it sounds like we have. I wanted to thank all board members and members of the public for attending today. And I did want to re-up the opportunity that was flagged in the DOJ update. So as Rebecca and Martha mentioned, we are looking for a new co-chair. If any of the subcommittee members are interested in this position or have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. And we are happy to talk with you about what that would entail. But otherwise, please be prepared to nominate and vote on a new co-chair at the next meeting. And we will hopefully have an initial draft ready for you by the next time we see you all as a subcommittee.
Thank you.
you.
I hope I didn't go too fast.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.